headlines, sorting through the media bias, exposing the propaganda, and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
I think big need now is debris removal, and we will be working with Oklahoma on supporting expedited debris removal. That will open up roads and streets, and then individual homeowners will be worked with so we can get that debris out of there.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. With you as always, I am your host, Tim Tapp, and that soundbite was Janet Napolitano talking about the efforts for relief going on in Oklahoma. If you ask me, though, if that's what passes for a news conference, why bother? A lot more things need to be done. A lot less talk needs to take place. And in this particular case, as we know, and a lot of folks from the Hurricane Sandy devastation is still willing to tell you, the government is far better at patting themselves on the back and telling everybody they've done a great job than they are at actually getting the job done. However, that being put aside, if you haven't already considered it, please consider making a donation to the Red Cross. You can do so as easily as going online and going to redcross.org. Even a donation as small as $5 or $10 can make a significant difference as the recovery efforts continue. Let me make it clear. No donation is too small, and I want to heavily encourage anybody who can to please make a contribution of a little bit of cash if they don't have the time and the ability to drop what they're doing and go out and try to help in the relief effort. And since I mentioned Hurricane Sandy a little bit earlier, also important to remember that the Red Cross is still on the ground and helping to provide relief efforts there as well. So the Red Cross being stretched relatively thin here in response to these terrible, terrible storms. The F5 tornado, the devastation that's taken place in Oklahoma, it is tragic. As far as me and my family, the prayers are with each and every one of you as you folks try to rebuild your lives. And for those of you who have lost family and friends, just know that our thoughts and prayers are with you as well. And I just don't know what else to say other than we're on your side. We'll do what we can here. And I'll be putting in the information link for tonight's show. Again, the webpage address for the Red Cross. Again, let me implore and plead with anybody, even if you think you don't have enough to really help out, just a few dollars will make a big difference to some of these people. So please consider it, think about it, and again, our thoughts, hopes, and prayers are with you. In times of tragedy and in times of disaster, what has always set Americans apart from other folks is we typically tend to pull together and stand together. And that's where we're at right now with that. Now, as you may or may not know, things continue to go on outside of Oklahoma in these terrible storms. For example, while we were focused on these storms, some terrible events happened in our government. Strangely enough, under the dark of night, while nobody was looking, a Senate panel has okayed tax welfare benefits for newly legal immigrants. Now, this has to do with the Gang of Eight's operations, and as they move forward, trying to assist and bring those illegals from out of the shadows, as they put it. This terrible, terrible excuse for immigration reform. We don't need reform of our immigration laws, folks. What we need is to enforce the laws we have. I don't think anybody begins to have any level of understanding of exactly how much money could be saved and how much time could be saved as far as misuse of funds and government resources if we simply would take on the task of enforcing the laws that currently exist. This is definitely true when it comes to immigration, and it is just as true in 500,000 other areas of our government's operation. But be that as it may, the Senate Judiciary Committee voted this past Monday to allow illegal immigrants who get legal status to begin collecting tax welfare payments as the panel spent a fourth day working through amendments to the massive immigration bill, and party line splits began to emerge immediately. Not a big surprise there. In one major change, the committee voted 17-1 to make a third drunken driving conviction a deportable offense for the newly legalized immigrants if at least one of those offenses occurs after they're approved for legal status. But immigrant rights groups called that a rollback of due process rights for the immigrants and said a drunken driving incident shouldn't cost someone a chance at citizenship. We cannot and will not support hardline proposals that take away discretion and limit an individual's ability to pursue the pathway to citizenship, said Panamaria Sharia, the Associate Director of the National Lawyers Guild and National Immigration Project. Overall, the committee continued to maintain the delicate balance struck by the Gang of Eight senators who negotiated the 867-page bill. Quick legal status for illegal immigrants, but delaying citizenship rights until after the administration spends more money on border security, puts in place a new electronic verification system to check workers' status, and enacts an entry-exit system to check visas at airports and seaports. In previous days' action, two Republican members of the Gang of Eight, Senators Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and Jeff Flake of Arizona, joined with Democrats to block a series of GOP amendments to stiffen the bill's security. But on Monday, the two Republicans sided with their party colleagues on key questions on giving illegal immigrants public benefits. The 10 Democrats on the committee still outnumber the newly unified Republicans, but the votes signaled tough fights ahead on the Senate floor. In one vote, Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama, Republican, tried to prevent anyone but citizens and green card holders from being able to claim an earned income tax credit, which uses the tax code to transfer money to the poor. But Senator Charles E. Schumer, a Democrat from New York, just in case you don't know who Chucky is, said that it would deny the tax credit not only to legalized immigrants, but also refugees and asylum seekers and other legal workers. Senator Mackenzie A. Hirono, Hawaiian Democrat, said denying a tax credit to legalized immigrants would hurt their children, many of whom are U.S. citizens. The committee avoided what likely would have been a bitter fight over guns and whether those on the government's terrorist watch list should be allowed to buy firearms when Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Rhode Island Democrat, withdrew his amendment. Evidently, we think it's okay for people on the terrorist watch list to buy a gun, Mr. Whitelist said. He did, however, say that he would try again later when the bill comes to the Senate floor. Well, certainly interesting enough that a Democrat wants to keep somebody from buying a gun. However, in this particular case, I suppose if they're on the terrorist watch list, maybe there's a reason we might want to think about not necessarily letting them have a legal firearm. If we prevent criminals, especially criminals who have committed certain felonies, to have their legal right to own a gun stripped from them, why would we try to protect the rights of non-citizens who are on a terrorist watch list? This, to me, doesn't make sense. This goes back to cutting off our own nose to spite our face. In this particular case, it's a disgrace face. Now, with that having been said, there is yet a bigger story on the horizon. And that, of course, is the fact that we had some action take place today in a much anticipated committee hearing in Congress involving one of the IRS's top agents who happened to be in charge of tax-exempt status at the time that the targeting took place. And if by any chance you happen to have been living under a rock and you're not familiar with what I'm talking about when I say the targeting, well, then obviously you haven't been paying attention to any news from the United States for the past couple of weeks. It was revealed last week via an apology from the IRS that the IRS tax-exempt status group had in fact been targeting conservative and certain religious organizations that were seeking tax-exempt status going into the election cycle of our previous election for the President of the United States. Strangely enough, one of the offices on the line. Why would groups with names like, well, with words like Tea Party and Constitutionalist and Patriot and the 9/12 Project, why would these kind of groups be targeted by the IRS to make it harder and more difficult for them to become tax exempt? Well, obviously, to take their voices out of the equation and to make it a little bit easier for people to buy the lie that conservatives just didn't show up to the polls. Yeah, was Mitt Romney the perfect choice? Was he the choice that would unify the folks? Obviously not. But does that mean that it's completely okay for us to sit back and say, let the government target anybody they want? At any rate, Lois Ledner went to court today and she made a bit of a stir. We'll get into that when we get back. Gonna take a short break. Stay with us. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and that quick break will be followed simply by doing the quick promo Here it is. Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth right here on Spreaker Radio. Yes, that's right. Right here on Spreaker Radio, Tap Into the Truth. Like I said, please check out the website. While you're there, go ahead and leave us a message. Contact us. One of the things that we're doing, by the way, please follow the show here when you have the opportunity. Also, go ahead and check us out on Blog Talk Radio, where Tap Into the Truth comes on every Sunday, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 2-hour show there. We often have interesting guests. Check out the show page over there and follow us there as well. One of the reasons why I'm asking you to do this, for those of you who have not already, is we'll be running a contest. We'll be giving some rewards to folks that are following the show starting in June. So please follow the show, and you increase your chances of winning by following us on both here at Spreaker and over at Blog Talk, and if you leave me a message at Tap Into the Truth. Each one of those will give you an extra opportunity to win a prize. We have 2 separate prize packs, and we're still in the process of trying to finalize exactly how many we'll be giving away, and if we'll be doing it on a weekly basis or if we'll be doing it once a month for a little while. But regardless of which one it is, all the details have not yet been finalized as far as what the prize packs contain, but I can tell you this much. One of the prize packs will contain a nice sampling of Country Fresh Fudge, and the other will contain a nice sampling of various food products from the fine folks of Jake and Amos and Miss Muller's. Various items like corn relish and certain jellies, like jams, and just some salsas, some different things. All very nice, all very high quality, and it's really hard to go wrong with these products. Let's go ahead and get back into the conversation at this point. I've got a soundbite here from Daryl Issa. Before we get to the main topic of Lois Lettner's excuse for testimony, Daryl Issa also talked to the head of the Watchdog Committee that was doing the report that eventually led to all the official apologies and the fallout from the IRS targeting of conservative groups. Here's what he had to say to the head of the Watchdog group.
You have a peer-level report of substantial misconduct or problems, including waste, fraud, and abuse. The Act describes your establishment, which meaning, in this case, the IRS, and Congress in the same sentence. On August 3rd, this committee, I sent you a letter explaining the 7-day rule, explaining the statute as it has been written for decades. You have a responsibility to keep us continuously and, according to statute, equally informed. In this case, it appears as though you certainly did not. Would you agree with that?
No, actually. Mr. Chairman, there are established procedures for conducting an audit, and once again, this is an audit. And to ensure fairness and to ensure that we are completely accurate with the information that we convey to Congress, we will not report information until the IRS has had an opportunity to take a look at it to ensure that we're not misstating facts.
Mr. George, that is not the statute. That is not the statute.
But it would be impractical for us to give you partial information which may not be accurate. It would be counterproductive, sir, if we were to do that.
Okay, so basically at this point, I was just trying to give this gentleman what for, and he's trying to be all matter of fact, which, fair enough. If the guy is an auditor, that is his job, and there is a certain amount of logic and reason to the idea of not turning in incomplete or false information. But it still seems to me like he's trying to do a little CYA and a little bit of the old DC two-step, where they shuffle responsibility under the rug and try to point in the other direction. This activity was going on for some time. We now know that there were 2+ years of knowledge by the higher-ups. The higher-ups. And yet, everybody in the Obama administration seems to have known, previous to the release of this report and previous to the official apology offered up by Lois Lerner and the IRS, that this had happened. Several people seem to have known about it for at least 2 years. There would have been no apology and no admission had it not been for the fact that this watchdog group was about to release its report. They, in fact, 10 days before they were going to release it, also notified people in the White House. Did not yet notify Congress. Congress was not notified until the day before the IRS came out with their apology, which was just before the public was made aware. If your job is to be a watchdog, and there is a statute that says you are to keep Congress informed equally as you do anyone else, then they've broken that statute. There are no excuses. You can make as many as you like, but once you've broken the law, you've broken the law. Is there a fairness issue in play? Maybe. That is the argument that they're making. Is that legitimate? I don't know. What I do know is it sounds flimsy to me, and it sounds like more crap. But unfortunately, once you have as much crap as we've been spoon-fed over the last several days from all of this, starting back over the course of the weekend, well, actually starting back well before that, almost all of last week, we had one thing after another, and we've talked about some of that. We've played some of the sound bites. Everything from Princess Nancy from Planet Pelosi talking about what a great visionary Obama is, and how the Benghazi talking point scandal is really nothing more than conservatives and Republicans desperately trying to cling and latch onto something because he's just such a visionary, and he's just such a great guy that there's nothing of substance that he can be attacked on. It is beyond sickening to hear somebody spouse off such absurdities. But regardless, today was a day that a lot of folks were really, really looking forward to, because they thought Lois Lerner would be able to fill in some of the blanks that so far we've just been given fluff. A chance to get some real answers. And that's what we were hoping for. Although, what actually happened, and we knew at least 24 hours, some of us a little bit longer than that Miss Lerner had no intention whatsoever of answering any questions. It had already been leaked, and it was already circulating all over Twitter, all over Facebook, all over the social medias, as well as all over the internet, at the news sites, that she had every intention of simply pleading the Fifth. Now, the thing about the Fifth Amendment is a lot of people tend to think that it automatically means that you're guilty of something. In this particular case, you can't help but wonder, but for the sake of being completely accurate, and as a constitutionalist, I'm a firm believer in the Fifth Amendment. But what really raises the hairs on the back of my neck when it comes to this is the fact that the Fifth Amendment is intended only for criminal investigations. This was not a criminal investigation. Now, in the case of if a civil incident should occur first or testimony in front of Congress should occur with the potential of criminal investigations coming later, then sometimes you have the legal grounds to take the Fifth Amendment at that point in time so that nothing that you say now can be used against you later. And let's make sure that we're thinking rightly, given Miss Lerner the benefit of the doubt, and that's way more than she deserves, quite honestly, given what transpired, because I think that she should have already been fired. At some point, the people who are supposed to be in charge are supposed to be in charge, and if they're not, someone else needs to be put in their place. At any rate, it is entirely possible for you to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And a skilled prosecutor will ask you just the right questions so that in you telling the truth, it further makes you look guilty of something. So, the Fifth Amendment basically says that you don't have to help the prosecution prove your guilt. You don't have to answer questions that might unfairly make you look guilty of something that you are not. So try not to assume guilt. However, here is the soundbite, and we'll discuss the situation a bit further after listening to Miss Lerner and her testimony, or lack thereof.
I note that you have not provided a written testimony for the committee. Do you wish to make an opening statement?
Yes, I do.
Please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Lois Lerner, and I'm the Director of Exempt Organizations at the Internal Revenue Service. I have been a government employee for over 34 years. I initially practiced law at the Department of Justice and later at the Federal Election Commission. In 2001, I moved to the IRS to work in the Exempt Organizations Office. And in 2006, I was promoted to be the director of that office. Exempt Organizations oversees about 1.6 million tax-exempt organizations and processes over 60,000 applications for tax exemption every year. As director, I'm responsible for about 900 employees nationwide and administer a budget of almost $100 million. My professional career has been devoted to fulfilling responsibilities of the agencies for which I have worked, and I am very proud of the work that I have done in government. On May 14th, the Treasury Inspector General released a report finding that the Exempt Organizations Field Office in Cincinnati, Ohio, used inappropriate criteria to identify for further review applications from organizations that plan to engage in political activity, which may mean that they did not qualify for tax exemption. On that same day, the Department of Justice launched an investigation into the matters described in the Inspector General's report. In addition, members of this committee have accused me of providing false information when I responded to questions about the IRS processing of applications for tax exemption. I have not done anything wrong. I have not broken any laws. I have not violated any IRS rules or regulations, and I have not provided false information to this or any other congressional committee. And while I would very much like to answer the committee's questions today, I've been advised by my counsel to assert my constitutional right not to testify or answer questions related to the subject matter of this hearing. After very careful consideration, I've decided to follow my counsel's advice and not testify or answer any of the questions today. Because I'm asserting my right not to testify, I know that some people will assume that I've done something wrong. I have not. One of the basic functions of the Fifth Amendment is to protect innocent individuals, and that is the protection I'm invoking today. Thank you.
Okay. So now with proper context and with full respect of what the purpose of the Fifth Amendment is, let's go back and ask some very basic questions. Miss Lerner, if you've done nothing wrong and if you've broken no laws, why do you need the Fifth Amendment protection at this point? Guys, if you were listening, pay close attention to her wording and her phrasing. She said that she has not provided false information to this or any other Senate committee, which simply means that she claims she has not directly lied to any of them. That's not a denial of generally lying to the public or generally lying to a larger body. These words were very carefully chosen because she did, in fact, deny that there was any such targeting going on for at least 1 year after she had knowledge. This has been made abundantly clear. She had knowledge as early as 2011, and according to some, she had knowledge in 2010. Now, if that was the case, then for at least 1 year, from 2011 until 2012, she lied about this not happening, because she said repetitively there were Tea Party groups that were very vocal about some of the ridiculous and outlandish hoops they were being forced to jump through. Need I remind anybody, certain groups being asked what the content of their membership's prayers were? It was stall tactics. It was embarrassment. It was one thing after another to come up with any excuse not to let this happen. So again, listen very carefully to what she has said. Now, immediately after this, Darrell Issa was then prepared to just dismiss her at that point. Was not going to press her any further on the issue. Was willing to accept her pleading the Fifth Amendment. I had heard and was looking desperately for the soundbite, could not find it. I will continue to look for it. Hopefully we'll have it for Sunday's show. Another member of the committee immediately spoke up and said, Mr. Chairman, once she gives this opening statement, if she makes the assertion, as she did in this case, that she's done nothing wrong, that she's innocent, then she has given up her Fifth Amendment protections because she has made a generalized statement and at this point must answer questions. And Darrell Issa at this point seemed confused. He stopped what he was doing. It was talked to some legal counsel. They had a little powwow. Came back. He then attempted to ask her 2 more questions, and again she said, basically, you can ask me anything you want, and you can ask as long as you want, but I'm not saying anything else. I'm continuing to take the Fifth Amendment. I'm not going to do anything that might potentially incriminate me. Well, as the day went on, excuse me, as the day went on, it became painfully clear that, in fact, this member of the committee was correct. Because of the nature of the statement she made, she had essentially waived her right to her constitutional protections from the Fifth Amendment. She had actually given testimony and is then, by the statutes of the law, compelled to answer questions and to try to validate what may or may not be factual information as far as the questions are concerned. It's basically the equivalent of if you decide you're going to testify on your own behalf. If you're in a murder trial and you decide that you're going to testify because you want to tell your story, then you have to answer the questions that the prosecutor is going to ask as well. If you're not going to testify on your own behalf, they're technically not supposed to call you to the stand, but if they do, then you can plead the Fifth Amendment as long as you don't make any statements or answer any questions in regard. So, by making the statement, I did nothing wrong, I broke no laws, I broke no IRS regulations, which that much is probably true. Some laws were broken, but were IRS regulations broken? Something tells me that the regulations there are probably far more lenient than what the actual laws regarding what they can and cannot say and do to their customers might happen to be. Regardless, Darrell Issa has later in the afternoon came back and said, after further review and further address with other legal experts, we will be recalling Miss Lerner, and she will have to answer questions. She did, in fact, waive her Fifth Amendment protection rights by making the statement that she made, which, if that is indeed the case, which there seems to be every indication that it is, she probably needs to hire some better lawyers because they should have told her not to make this statement. If she was going to follow this particular guidelines, if she was going to take their recommendations and not testify, certainly Darrell Issa was prepared to just let her go. Here's the interesting thing. How long is it going to take to get Miss Lerner back in front of this committee and get her to answer some questions? Because I still don't believe she's in any big hurry to answer any questions. What does this mean to you, the average citizen? Well, maybe not a lot. This does seem to smack of just the circus, the show. This is us doing our part to try and protect you from us. That's what they're doing. In the end, what's going to happen? I don't know. Evidently, Miss Lerner did not get the memo that she was supposed to just fall on the sword to protect the Messiah. The occupier is sitting in the White House, and this is probably the worst possible outcome because here's what it does. It admits that there is the possibility that something criminal may have happened, therefore there may be criminal investigations. Now, how far up does this criminal activity go? Well, if this was just the renegade actions of a couple of low-level employees in the Cincinnati office, as they've maintained from the beginning, although it then stretched to a couple of folks in Washington, a couple of folks in New York, and much like the AP spying story, I have a feeling that by the time we get to the bottom of it, it's going to have expanded tremendously. How far does this go? I'm sorry, I have a very hard time believing that the occupier did not know this was going on. In fact, I have a very hard time believing, because it just smacks of Chicago-style politics, that Rahm Emanuel didn't set this in motion before he left the White House, and that Barack not only was aware, but was encouraging, and may have even given the order. He may have even handpicked a couple of these groups himself to say, give those guys a hard time. It's all a matter of making sure that they don't raise trouble for me. The denials don't ring true. And even if, through some ridiculous miracle, that Barack Hussein Obama didn't know what the IRS was doing, but it's not acceptable. Well, it's also not acceptable that you don't know what's going on at one of the branches that answers to the executive branch. The IRS, who's supposed to be your Obamacare compliance folks, you need to be cleaning them out and taking care of business. You should know what they're doing. Just like you should know what Eric Holder and his Justice Department are up to all of the freaking time. There are no excuses, zero excuses for you not to know what they're doing. You have failed miserably. Even Chris Matthews, who has an Obamagasm every time he sees the man, every time he hears him speak, every time regardless, has even soured on him. Of course, it has more to do with the AP story than it has to do with anything else. But when Chris Matthews is making statements that are anti-Obama, then you know something's going on. And take a listen, just in case you hadn't heard it. This is Chris Matthews having an anti-Obama moment.
What part of the presidency does Obama like? He doesn't like dealing with other politicians. That means his own cabinet. That means the members of the Congress, either party. He doesn't particularly like the press. What part of it does he? He likes to write the speeches. He likes to rewrite what Favreau and the others wrote for the first draft. But what part does he really like? He likes going on the road campaigning, visiting businesses like he does every couple of days somewhere in Ohio or somewhere. What part does he like? Because he doesn't like lobbying for the bills he cares about. He doesn't like selling to the press, where most people do, to get their stories out there. Does he like actually giving orders or giving somebody the power to give orders? No, he doesn't seem to like to be an executive.
Translation: what part of being the president does Obama like? Because I can't say that he likes doing any of the actual work of being the president. This is Chris Matthews, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. MSNBC, Mr. Protect Obama. This is, I get just chills going up and down my spine. I just get these feelings in my leg. The man on air has gushed. He has literally had Obamagasms every freaking time the man's giving a speech. And even he asks the question, when is he going to stop campaigning and start governing? Well, the answer is never, Chris. That's quite it. He's not competent to. He doesn't know what's going on anywhere. In fact, put simply, at no time did the Obama administration have any idea what the Obama administration was doing. I mean, that's it. That's where we're at. Also, the AP story has widened now. There are several folks being drawn in. A few reporters at Fox now have been named as possible conspirators in criminal activities. So they had their personal emails and their personal phone calls flashed through. Some reporters at CBS now claim that the DOJ had hacked into their work and home computers. And, I said it from the beginning. There's no way that it was only the AP that these guys were spying on. It's just not possible. These guys know that while the reporters have been in the bag for them, that they need to plug the leaks, because there's some folks that have some very damning information about what they've been up to. And trust me, when you're criminals, the last thing you want is someone investigating what you're up to. So here's hoping that the press learns a very important lesson about protecting the occupier at any cost. Eventually, it's going to cost them the freedom of the press. That's tonight's show, everybody. Remember, don't take my word for it. Definitely don't take their word for it. Take a little time, do a little of your own research, use your brain. That's what you've got it for. Check this stuff out for yourself, and always tap into the truth. Good night, everybody.